Hello and welcome to another edition of Close Mode, the Enterprise Sales Show. I am Brian Dietmeyer, CEO of Close Strong AI, the home of precision guided selling. And today I'm really lucky to be here with Arup Chakravarti, and also excited about the subject we're going to be talking about. But just a little background. Arup's got a lot of experience in sales and enterprise selling. Fellow of the Institute of Sales Professionals, ambassador at Sales Enablement Council, held several positions in sales enablement and sales ops at Equifax and Elevon, if I'm saying that one right. So, welcome to the show.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Brian, for having me on.
So, the topic for today is mindfulness or EQ and how they overlap and how we can use that. And it's funny because last week you and I were chatting and we wandered into a discussion about mindfulness and meditation and how we both use those tools to improve our lives and improve our professional lives. And I will also tell listeners, you and I hesitated, like, is this too kind of out there and conceptual for people? And we both said, no, this is something we really want to talk to each other about and share with our listeners. So, yeah.
No. Thank you for bringing this subject to life. And I think there's still a lot of data that we could probably gather in terms of how folks generally react to the subjects of meditation and mindfulness. I think at the moment,
Yeah.
what we've exchanged actually between you and I, know obviously one conversation to date, but I think that's quite kind of symbolic of the conversations that I've had. Is like nobody's really quite sure if it feels a little bit too new age for for discussion in sales professional
Yeah.
circles, or whether actually it is something that salespeople are now starting to kind of really engage with and sort of get value from. So I don't know if there's any data. I think again it's all sort of qualitative assessments that we've got, just in terms of how we've seen other people respond to it. So when you told me last week, when you told me that story about the sales kickoff, I thought actually that was awesome, because again, that just shows you how sometimes you have your own shield up, you have your own kind of you look at things through your own biased lens, and maybe that's not the
Yes.
reality.
Yeah. So let's start with we're going to end this today with talking about like winning and losing deals and screwing up presentations and try to make this
Yeah.
tangible about how some of this mindset works. But I want to start with, like, at a high level, what the heck even is mindfulness? How would you describe it?
Definitely describe it as present moment awareness.
Yeah.
And I think it's a difficult one to sort of, and again, I've been practicing meditation and mindfulness much more seriously for almost 2 years now, from January 2023. And I think one of the concepts that I've been trying to get myself comfortable with is that when you're practicing meditation or when you're practicing mindfulness, right? I guess there are a number of techniques that you have that sit underneath that practice of mindfulness. Meditation is one, deep breathing is another, even stretching exercises, kind of intentional stretching
Yeah.
exercises. They're all activities that help you feel as if you're in the moment. What you're trying to do when you're being mindful is be aware of the now, and almost tune out some of the distraction that you have. And interestingly, a lot of that distraction is the distraction, the sort of the noise and the voices you have in your own mind. So it's not even
Yeah.
necessarily the kind of external distraction, right? Because I've actually practiced. I mean, I've meditated, closed my eyes and meditated on a busy train, and it's I think much easier for us to tune out that external noise, but to be able
Yeah.
to somehow feel in balance with the noise that we have in our own minds. I think that's what mindfulness is. It's about being able to be
Yeah.
comfortable with it. It's not trying to switch it off, because I think trying to switch it off isn't necessarily positive. It's about just being comfortable with it, being comfortable with kind of all of that chatter, and still being very very comfortable in the moment. And that's
Yeah.
yeah, that's how I describe it.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm doing it
Yeah.
justice.
No, I think you did. It's interesting too. One of my favorite writers is Thich Nhat Hanh, who's a Vietnamese Buddhist monk, and he talks about a lot about monkey brain. and you like, and I love that. Like that's so visual for me that it's like we have monkeys chattering in our brain, and that's what you just said. It's like, and the further what he said to me, that mindfulness is you're starring in that movie, right? That whole chatter in your brain. And he said
Constantly, constantly.
if you can
Yes.
back up and observe the movie, and that to
Yeah.
me is that, like, that present awareness to go, okay, I am aware right now that I'm panicking in my brain, and I'm
Yes.
observing that, but I'm not
Yes.
going to be in the middle of the panic. We just make so much better
Yes.
decisions when we stop getting sucked into that vortex of the monkey chatter in our brain. So I want to clarify something, and I'd love your perspective on this for folks who are listening. There is a really strong correlation between mindfulness and EQ, and I think they're almost interchangeable in some senses. So, but what we're talking about is very often associated with Buddhism and Zen Buddhism, which is the practice that I have. And you were talking about your experience. I mean, many years ago, like I went as far as spending time in a Korean temple for months, not living there for months, but studying the precepts, the Zen precepts, and accepting Zen
Yeah.
precepts and doing overnight silent meditation. So it's like I am way far from an
Nice.
expert at this stuff, but I know how it helps me every day. But here's my question for you: is Buddhism a religion?
Yeah. So I suppose I guess it's what it's defined as a non-deity religion, right? So it is still considered to be a religion, obviously practiced by a lot of people across the world. There isn't a god or a deity to it.
Right.
The Buddha himself was, as an individual man, a human being. I guess it still is religious because it still has concepts such as reincarnation embedded into it. Maybe just
Yeah.
I mean, and I have a lot of respect for the Buddhist religion. I wouldn't call myself religious. I'd say I'm spiritual, but I wouldn't call myself
Yeah.
religious.
Yep.
My attraction to meditation and mindfulness was never from a religious perspective. It was always from that process of the more I'd read about it and the more I started to read about, and in particular, you just mentioned it, in particular, its correlation with the ability to improve your emotional intelligence and your emotional quotient. I read in a number of places that meditation was a really strong practice to help you build that up. And equally at the same time,
Yeah.
as I was kind of consuming that material, I was also really interested in high performance and what drives high performance. And everything comes back to
Yes.
mindset, self-regulation, self-belief, that process of having structure, that 1%, that marginal gains approach towards everything, towards like you've got to have that discipline, you've got to have that structure to have that balance, to have that self-regulation. So many folks, high performers that I'd heard in podcasts and read and all the rest of it across a number of disciplines, whether it's sport, business, politics, etc. Everyone was saying it was mindset, and a lot of folks were saying that
Yeah.
they practiced meditation as well to help
Yeah.
them maintain that mindset. So
I
for me, it
love.
wasn't religious. It was like,
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I love your focus on high performance, right? This is an enterprise sales show, and that's and so yeah, I will tell you that my perspective on that religion thing is, that the head of the Buddhism world is the Dalai Lama, right? And Dalai Lama said
yeah, yeah,
really that Buddhism was the first psychology, and I love
yeah,
that. That's how he designs it. Like and furthermore, he works with many of the great world religious leaders to incorporate meditation into your practice. Like you can have that religion and you can still use ours because it is a psychology and it is a mind practice. And there's also he's done a lot of work with neuroscientists about what happens to your brain and the strength of your brain and the strength of your performance when you meditate. So yeah, just a quick question for you. What pulled you toward this approach? Like at what point did you and you started to touch on this a little bit earlier, I think, relating to performance.
yeah. So I think in three things happened in through the course of Q4 2022. I went to this will be probably very specific to any of your UK audience, we have an annual show here called the National Sales Conference. So I went to that, and I know the gentleman who organizes it, and the organization puts all the effort and the energy behind it. But they had a number of speakers on stage, one of which was again a British cyclist from the I mean, won gold in 2012 Olympics, etc. And a number of speakers on stage that were consistently going back to this message of the kind of mindfulness and meditation being
Yeah.
kind of a strong proponent for being able to drive performance. So I think I was in that place where I wanted to understand what drives mindset. Like how do you grow? Like when we talk about, and this idea of growth mindset versus static mindset or fixed mindset has been around for a while too. And I was kind of really curious to understand, like, what are some of the techniques? Like, it's so easy for us to kind of go, okay, I'm a fixed mindset person, right? Because nobody wants to. Sorry, I'm a growth mindset person because nobody wants to classify themselves as a fixed mindset person. But actually, if you've got a little bit of emotional intelligence, then by its very nature, you want to be able to say, actually, these are some of my traits that I need to work on because they're more fixed mindset
Yeah.
traits. And I've noticed that about myself. And actually, I need to kind of think about how do I grow that from being a fixed mindset trait to being more of a growth mindset trait. So I wanted to explore some of the drivers behind that, some of the drivers of how can you do that? Because it's the
Yeah.
self-identification and the self-motivation that leans you towards, I want to be a high performer, or at least I want to be a better performer. I may not be the highest performer, but if I set the bar being better than I was yesterday, then I'm moving towards that. And what I started to discover was that meditation was a strong practice behind that. The second thing was, we talked about this actually just before the show. I read Daniel Goleman's Emotional Intelligence at the same time, and that everything in there about self-regulation, a lot of the techniques that he talks about comes back to again, meditation, mindfulness. And the third thing was, I was listening to again, a very UK specific, so my apologies, a show here called the High Performance Podcast, and it came through on that too as well. So I had, some, maybe this is confirmation bias, but I had a number
Yeah.
of stars kind of all leading me towards the same conclusion. And when I got back in, we'd been on holiday that festive season 2022 into January 2023. When I came back, I think one of my first commitments to myself was, okay, let's start this. Let's see how it goes. It doesn't have to be scary.
Yeah.
Let's do 10 minutes a day, every 2 or 3 days. Let's just factor it into the
Yeah.
working week and just see how it goes.
Cool.
And it just built up
Yeah.
from there.
And we're gonna chat in a moment. For those who aren't familiar, like I'd love to hear like your most basic approach to meditating, and I will share mine as well because I think that's kind of mystical to some people. This notion of it, but it's funny. One of the reasons I wanted to do this podcast is. I was doing a pre-interview for a podcast probably 6 months ago, and one of the questions I asked the guest often is, "What's something you've done as?" And this person was a sales enablement lead, as a sales enablement lead, what's something you've done that you were surprised at the results of, either good or bad? Like you thought this is going to be the best, and the organization was just like, no, this is stupid. Don't ever do that again. And it surprised me. She said they had a last minute cancellation at SKO, and she
Yeah, yeah.
brought in a friend of hers who was a mindfulness expert, and she was so afraid that I think she said that it's like she was like, my peers are going to say, oh, this is just some hippy dippy crap from from her, and the reaction and the scores at the SKO for the mindfulness session were quite high. And she was completely shocked by that. So that gave me the confidence to say, hey, I think there's some interest here. We should talk about it. And it's funny, too. One of the things that pulled me toward this approach is many, many years ago. I remember the time I was sitting in my truck in a Target parking lot for some reason up near Wisconsin. And one of my partners said to me, you're really good when things are going well. Like you spread the money around, but when things go bad, you suck. Like you're and I did find that I got my clock cleaned emotionally when I lost a deal or something. And my
Right.
team was feeling that. And I reached out to a friend of mine, Leo, who leads men's groups on mindfulness and stuff. And he's this gravelly old bear. And Leo, I call him up and I'm like, man, Carrie told me this. Like this is troubling. And he said, Dietmar, how many times have you failed? And I was like, well, wait, and I was just like, and you don't want to be too cocky about that, but I'm like, no, things have gone well. Like I work really hard. Things have gone well for a number of years. And he said, yeah, you suck at failure. Like you don't know, you don't have a lot of practice at it. You don't know how to fail. And so that's Arup what pulled me in. So let's do talk about before we talk about, scenarios. How does this help you when you're getting your clock cleaned or something? So yeah, what's your simplest approach to meditating? Describing
It's a
someone if
lot
someone
easier
wants to
these
try
days.
it.
No,
Yeah.
honestly, it's a lot easier these days. So I used an app, right? Probably, I'm not gonna. If you want me to name it, I can, but I think it's quite
Sure, go
commonplace. So I
ahead.
use. I mean,
Yeah.
there's plenty of this. Yeah. So I use Headspace. I don't know if
Yeah.
it's the
Yeah.
best app or not. I've had conversations with a few people. A few people like, Calm's better for this, that, the other. I'm like, okay, I get it. I think what happens is, so it's a lot easier to do. It's a lot easier to start new skills and new practices now in our kind of in our modern era, our contemporary era. Yeah, I'm stating the obvious, but it is. It's easy enough to learn language. It's easy enough to learn how to meditate. You don't have to find yourself overly committed. You can do it in your own time. It's an app on the phone, so if you want to do a day a week, 2 days a week, 3 days a week, and just build it up from there, you can.
Yeah.
I
Yep.
I'd used Headspace previously, maybe like 4 or 5 years prior, and done like the beginner's course, which was available for free as a sort of a taster, and then never stretched beyond that. And then I went back to it and kind of committed and said, okay, I'll pay the annual fee, which isn't substantial. I was like, I'll pay the
Yeah.
annual fee, and I'm going to start doing it. And it's part of that commitment to myself. I made that promise to myself over that break, that kind of festive season break. And I was like, right, when I get back, if I'm really serious about wanting to see if this is a skill that can help me raise my own bar, well, then it's £70 for a year subscription, which is not huge, right? So I was like, okay,
Yeah.
this is a small investment in many respects in myself. And I'll work at it, and I did, and that was literally it, Brian. It just started off being 10 minutes, I think, every 3 days, and then it sort of became 10 minutes every 2 days, and then it went from 10 to 15 minutes, and then went from 15 to 20 minutes. To be honest with you, most days now. Last year, I had my longest run streak, which I've not managed to catch. I did 124 days, every day consecutively. I did 20 minutes a day every day consecutively. And the only reason it stopped was because we went on holiday. And I was like,
Right.
so relaxed on holiday, I forgot to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would add, I'm with you on Headspace, and I would add too that recently I've been even looking on YouTube for guided meditation. So, and there's I don't want to get too much in the weed on this, but there's contemplative and concentrative meditation. And contemplative, the guided meditations on YouTube are free, and most of them are about 10 minutes long. And if you're
Yeah,
brand new to this, like I've done the concentrative stuff, which I'll talk about in a moment, for years, and I've just now recently gone to the guided stuff, and I kind of wish I would have started there. So yeah, one can go to YouTube and search, and you know what, you might land on a couple that don't sound great. Skip over them and find one that's resonating with you and
just one
stick
that
there.
does
But
completely.
yeah,
I do guided, and it's good. It's the voice is there. It just leads you towards where you need to be. It just reminds you about what you should be doing at a given point in time. It's great. You know what? It's great. And you know what? And I know what my biggest challenge is. Some days I practice meditation great, and I'm in my own headspace without there being too much noise. And other days, like today, this morning, I did it this morning. There was a lot of noise in
monkey
there,
monkey
and
brain.
that's the reality. Monkey brain. And that's the
Well,
reality.
but
I
I
think that. Go
no,
ahead.
I'm sorry. I want to react to that because this is
Yeah, yeah, please.
a lot of folks that I've talked to about this. So the concentrative stuff, it's a matter of fo- sitting there and focusing on your in breath and your out breath, and then all of a sudden the thought comes in. I'm really mad at Arup for something he did to me last week, and it's thought labeling, going, okay, I'm thinking about that. I'm mad at Arup now. I want to bring myself back to my breathing. Like I want to be in charge of these things that are in my head. And by the way, they're always going to come up unless you're some kind of a flippin'
They always do.
guru. The thought, and that doesn't mean you suck at it. And I've heard too many people go, I suck at it.
Completely.
And it's like, no, it's the practice of
It's
labeling that thought,
completely.
going back, and it's muscle memory. It's just like going to the gym. It's building that muscle memory in your brain of being able
Completely.
to observe what's happening versus being caught up in it. So
Completely.
let's talk a little bit about street level, like as we near the end of our chat. Street level. So it's back to this thing with my partner Carrie saying to me, you suck at not doing well. um, and so if we're a sales leader or even a salesperson, and a lot of stuff that kicks our butt is we lose a deal, or we blow. I mean, and I was thinking about this. Like, I can think about presentations I've done on a super important deal, and I just feel like I blew it. And it's like that thing after. Like, how does mindfulness, like, in your, like, tools, anything, how does it help you? Yeah, when you're just sitting there wallowing in self pity because you just blew something.
So I think the so meditation, it's and I try to, so I don't think, my partner says this to me quite regularly. She's like, why are you getting stressed about stuff? Don't you meditate every day?
Right.
I meditate every
Yeah.
day. That doesn't suddenly mean like, all of this stress is just gone, right? It's there.
Right.
It's there. Of
Right.
course, you're going to respond to things emotionally. Of course, you are. And that's completely natural. I think what I found is that I now personally respond to things in a slightly more balanced way. I can see that at work. I can see that at home. I can see that my first initial emotional response, which is always there, and it always comes through just exactly as you were just
Yep.
just mentioning just a few minutes ago. It always comes through. And actually, what I'm much better at now is kind of going, okay, hold on a second, Arup. You're responding to this emotion. I get to that place really quick. And then I walk away, and I'm sure people, so I'm talking about my personal experience, but hopefully this is resonating. I walk away, and a lot of times when you walk away, you still have that, "Oh, I wish I'd said this, I wish I'd said that, I wish I'd said the other." And I notice, I'm so much better at noticing the narrative and going, you know what, Arup, there's no point. You can stay in
Yes.
this dialogue internally. You can stay in this internal dialogue, or you can kind of go, all right, it didn't work out. It didn't happen this time. Let's park it. Let's figure out in time, not now, but let's figure out what I'm going to learn from it. And actually, let's figure out how I'm going to take this forward. And I know that I'm better at that because, like you, I'm doing that practice every single morning. Like, when a thought comes in, I'm labeling it. I'm going, okay, is this a good thought? Is it a bad thought? How do I want to respond to it? Maybe I don't. Maybe I just park it and I go back to concentrating on the breathing. And it is,
Yep.
I find it's been really positive. And in fact, I'd say it's probably been really positive for me in my personal life, just in terms of being a little
Yeah.
bit more balanced at home, a little bit more emotionally regulated. The other thing that I'd
Yeah.
say that I've noticed as well is that as the meditation practice has helped me build that kind of emotionally intelligence muscle, I am a little bit better. It's a difficult one to measure. I feel like I'm better at listening. I feel like I'm being a bit more empathetic. I also feel like I'm trying to find that compromise. So,
Yep.
so when I'm in kind of that negotiation situation, I'm not. I'm trying to not get into a place where there's a bit, the emotion comes in and it feels like it's zero sum. um, I'm trying to listen better. I'm trying to be more empathetic, and I'm also telling myself, don't get caught up in this. Try to find the
Right.
compromise. Try to find the trade-offs. Trying
Yeah.
to find the pathway through this, because you can. You can. If you get caught up in the emotion, if you get caught up in the exchange, if you get caught up in the heatedness, then you're going to allow it to become a zero-sum game, and there's no point in that, right? So
Yeah.
so try to find a way through this, and I think
That's
that I
yeah.
feel like I do better at it.
Yep. It's cool. The one thing I would add for listeners, watchers here is I also find reading books about Zen or about meditation or mindfulness, like, because they present constructs. So meditation is that thing we do to build up the muscle in our brain so we can observe when when all hell's breaking loose in our brain, and try to adjust. But the books, like, there's a couple concepts that one is called the second arrow, which is, this is stuff that I use every day. And the notion of the second arrow is that as humans, like, we could lose a deal, or the notion, but the true story behind the actual story behind the second arrow is, you get hit with an arrow, there's actual pain there, like, that happened. But the second arrow is the one we shoot at ourselves, where it's, woe is me, why did I have to get shot by this arrow? And I find that, like, day in and day out, that reaction look, the reality of life is here's a core problem. We believe stuff's going to be great forever. The reality is it's not. Great stuff doesn't last forever. Pain doesn't last forever. Losing deals doesn't last forever. So recognizing that, first of all, life's going to change like crazy. So just get ready for that, and don't shoot that second arrow when that bad thing happens,
Yeah,
because I would add to that notion that, like, being aware of, now I'm in the wallowing and the self pity. The thing happened. I just lost $1 million deal. That happened. That's a real arrow I got shot with. When you start getting into that wallowing, there's no future there. And there's a concept that I know I struggled with for a while, which is good isn't good and bad isn't bad. Like, what's happening is just what's occurring right now. And when we can, and that helps me with the second arrow to go, okay, get out of this good and bad notion. This just happened. I just lost a deal. And not labeling it as, oh my God, this is the worst thing in the world. My whole career is going to fumble. That doesn't help. Saying this just happened, getting clarity of mind and saying, what decisions do I now need to make that are not reacting to the emotions related to this thing, but related to the real thing that happened. And that is the idea of good isn't good and bad isn't bad, is like, this is just what's happening. Let me get clarity, and what's the best decision for me to make right now, which oftentimes is nothing at the moment. So anyway, for what it's worth, those are street level things that make a difference when we're trying to pull in new investors, or we're trying to get new deals closed, and you get
absolutely.
your lunch handed to you, and it's just like, okay, this just happened. Now what?
Completely, completely. I think
Um,
it's an interesting one because I still struggle with that a little bit as well. Like, how do you? I mean, you've been practicing this for a while, right? And so your level of competence is much higher. And I guess I practice on the basis that I see this as, I mean, and it's I guess it's different, right? I still practice on the basis of, I think this is a tool. Mine is almost like this
right.
rational connection of, I think this is a tool. If I do this, it will lead to this, and it will improve this. And actually, as I've been exploring the philosophy of it, I'm like, yeah, actually, the philosophy is I mean, it's really beautiful. Am I there yet to practice it on more philosophical basis? I think I still have a few. Like, I still have a few chapters to go before I feel like I'm in that place from a maturity
Yeah.
perspective. But yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
I still get
I'm way
emotional.
far from way, and that's fine. It's just being able, of course, that's gonna happen, right? And then we just had to observe it and go, "Okay, I'm losing my
Exactly.
I'm losing my crap right now. Like, let me get a little more centered and make better decisions." Yeah, I will end by sharing a story that I had a teacher in this Korean temple that I spent time in, taught to us, and you may have heard this story, but I really like it, and it's kind of the good isn't good, bad isn't bad thing. And she told a story about, a farmer's horse ran away. You may be familiar with this. And the neighbor comes over and says, "Oh, that's really bad. Your horse got out of the paddock last night and is gone." And the farmer says, how do you know that? Right? How do you know that that's bad? And the next day, the horse comes back, and the horse brought a friend back. So now the farmer has two horses.
Two
And
horses.
the neighbor comes over and says, "Wow, that's really great." And the guy with the horses is like, "Well, how do you know that?" I'm almost done with the story. The third round of this is the son goes out to help break the second horse and train it, and he gets hurt and thrown off the horse and gets hurt. And the neighbor comes over and says, "Oh, that's really bad. Your son got hurt." And the farmer, of course, says, "How do you know that?" And then, the final segment of the story is there's a war going on, and the government's looking for people to fight in this war, and they come to the farmer's house, and his son can't be conscripted because he's hurt. And of course,
Goodness.
the neighbor says, "Oh, that's really good news." And the farmer says, "How do you know that?" And it's so it to me, I told that story at a wedding once, and I feel like people looked at me like I was whacked, but maybe three people got it. And you don't know. You have to let stuff play out over time.
You have
We
to
we
play out.
judge, we go, this is a really bad thing, this is a really good thing. And my simple response to that often is apparently. we don't know. Like we have to see how it plays out. So yeah, this has been a really fun discussion, and as I mentioned before, if we'll see what people's reactions are to it, but it's super helpful as it relates to performance. And I think being a good leader, being a good emotionally sound leader, and being a seller who can accept the highs and the lows of doing and losing big deals and botching presentations, it just, you're right, they are tools, and they are evidence-based tools, and if they don't work, you don't do them anymore. So, Arup, I really appreciate you taking this journey from me. We are both, sort of taking our time to make sure that we wanted to talk about this on a business podcast, and I'm really glad we did, and I'm really glad that yeah, you took that leap with me, and thank you so much for your time and your ideas.
No, no, it's been a real pleasure, Brian. And I know we've been talking about something that you could consider a little bit left field, a little bit esoteric. But actually, I'm also glad that I've had an opportunity to be able to bring it back to something like really practical, such as like how do you tie that into high performance, and how do you tie that into ultimately, closing more deals at the end of the day, right? And that's what it's about.